Feeling? Doing good? Happy Father's Day to everybody. Good to see you all. So, I don't know, let's stand up. It feels sleepy in here. Maybe it's just me, but that's how it feels. So I guess it was the meditation. So let's shift the energy a little bit. So lift your hands up just a little bit. Open up your hearts. And Holy Spirit, we acknowledge your presence. We welcome you here. We thank you for your anointing and your power and your blessing. Thank you for your grace that is upon our lives. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the angels that surround and help us. In all things, we give you praise. Amen. Okay. Everybody feel a little bit better? Look at somebody and ask them. Just look at somebody and say, I'm really glad it's summer. Like it took forever to get here, like forever. Like what kind of twilight zone did I step into? But anyway, nice day today, huh? All right, so I know it's Father's Day, so I'm going to try and somehow tie it in with Father's Day, but probably not really. But I'm going to try. But I want to talk about manifesting, or just kind of along the same lines that we've been talking about, changing your life by living from the inside out. Now, there's an ancient axiom that comes from Hermetic writings, and I'll explain that in a minute, that says, as above, so below. Have you heard that? As above, so below, as within, so without. So it's part of an ancient Egyptian tradition that started with a guy, a philosopher known as Hermes, the thrice great. I can't say it in the original language or whatever, but it translates to the thrice great. And he was, some interesting stories about Hermes. One of the most interesting stories about Hermes is that, okay, so let me just back up even further. So before the time of Alexander the Great, there was the Great Library of Alexandria that housed all of the ancient knowledge and wisdom and histories. And sometime, a few centuries before the time of Christ or the Common Era, it was completely destroyed. It was ransacked and burned. And with it went knowledge about our history. But some of the people who had access to that information wrote, people like Plato, Aristotle. And one of the places that they talk about is Atlantis and the lost continent or place called Atlantis. So a lot of stuff about Atlantis, but the fact of the matter is it's probably was a real place. And he describes it as being very spiritually and scientifically evolved. So this isn't like woo-woo stuff. This is like just what we know, right? And he talks about how that information about their society and whatever was lost when the library was burned. So one of the legends, one of the traditions about Hermes was that he was a priest from Atlantis who went to Egypt and taught the Egyptians their wisdom. And it's contained in a book called the Emerald Tablet. And so that statement, as above, so below, or as within, also, you could say as within, so without, is part of the Emerald Tablet. And it carries this idea within it. Now, remember, from a Judeo-Christian perspective, Moses, and in fact, Israel, as a nation, was incubated in Egyptian culture. And it says of Moses that he was learned in all the ways and the writings of the Egyptians. And what's interesting, something used to bother me. In Acts chapter 7, it says that Moses was mighty in word. He was learned in all the ways of the Egyptians, and he was mighty in word. But when you read the story from Exodus, when God calls him at the burning bush, he says, I send somebody else because I cannot speak. That's why Aaron was sent with him, because Aaron was more eloquent in speech than Moses was. So how do you reconcile those two? How do you have, well, in one place in the Bible where Moses is saying, you know, I stutter, I can't talk to Pharaoh, whatever, you know, the issue is. I'm not good with my language, my communication. And then in another place it says that he was mighty in word. It's because it's a bad translation when it says mighty in word. What it actually says there was that he was knowledgeable of all the secret words of power. So here's the point. Whatever Egyptian knowledge was there was given to Moses, who was the founder of the Hebraic knowledge. So everything in the West goes back to Egypt. Abraham had to go through Egypt. Jesus was incubated in Egypt. Most of your early church fathers, believe it or not, were Egyptians or Africans. So there's a pattern there where everything kind of starts and gets incubated in Egypt. And so this idea of as above, so below is this idea that the universe is created as exactly that, a unified system. Things visible and invisible, and whatever's true on one level is true on another level, or whatever is changed at one level changes everything at another level. Now, to make this really basic and simple for you, if you set a goal, and I've talked about this before, but we all have an ecology in our life. We all have a balance that we try to maintain within our life in terms of how we spend our time, primarily. How we spend our time, how we spend our energy. So most people fail at goal setting because they just set a goal without taking into account how that change is going to correspond and correlate to the rest of their life and completely disrupt their ecology. So here's what I mean by that. So, and I've used this before, but just to explain it again for maybe those of you that haven't heard it or you forgot or you're just a little bit lost with what I'm saying. If you're going to set a goal to get in shape, that goal is going to change, is going to have an impact that is going to resonate throughout your entire life. Because, okay, I'm going to get in shape, I'm going to eat right, I'm going to get healthy, right? Okay, so I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to go work out with Jordan so I can get in shape, right? So first thing I got to do is I have to be there at 6, and I'm a half hour away, drive. So that means at the very latest I got to get up at 5. Now, I'm generally a night owl, first part of my ecology that's affected. Like it's really hard for me, no matter how tired I am, to get to sleep before midnight. So now I got to try to get to bed earlier. Well, what does that change? Well, that's going to change some of my evening routine. I have to start getting ready for bed earlier. Well, what's that going to change? You get it? And that's just that simple thing. Now, the other part is, I'm going to expend a bunch of energy at 6 o'clock in the morning, so am I going to eat or am I not going to eat? And then when I expend that energy, then I'm going to be tired throughout the day because I can't just shift my sleep schedule overnight, right? Pun intended. I can't just shift my sleep schedule overnight. So now I'm tired during the day, so that's affecting my work. You see what I'm saying? So that one little change, and I'm not even talking about diet and having to give up all the stuff I love and all that stuff. That one little change has reverberated throughout my entire life to disrupt the ecology of my life. And whether or not I can tolerate that determines whether or not I'll have the ability to reach my goal. More than willpower. It's not willpower. See, people say, well, you just have to have willpower. And how many of you have ever been to a goal-setting thing and you don't even want to go? Like somebody talks about goal setting and you what do you really feel inside? Like, where are you going to be in 5 years? What's your goals for your finances? What's your goals for your marriage? And all this hyper achievement culture that we live in, and you just feel sick. Or New Year's resolutions roll around and you gave up New Year's resolutions a long time ago because they just make you feel like a failure because you decide. And then what are the messages that you give yourself? See, I'm showing you another example of how everything is interrelated. All you did was set a New Year's resolution that you didn't keep. And so what does that mean to you? And then you hear about other people that kept theirs. So now you're comparing. So then the next time you go to do goal setting, you got all this unfinished business inside because you have all this, I was a failure, I messed up. But I don't have enough willpower. When the truth is, it's not about willpower. It's about as above, so below, or as within, so without. It's about the fact that everything is interconnected, and a change at one level, even if it's a small change, reverberates throughout the entire system. You could do the same thing with finances. If you want to improve your finances, okay, great. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means I have to either make more or spend less, or ideally both. Okay, so I'm going to spend less. So what does that mean? Well, that means, okay, let's see, paying DirecTV a god-awful amount of money for what we use. And you can get Netflix for, a lot cheaper, and even Hulu and these things. So we're going to cancel DirecTV. We're going to save money there, right? Right? Except when football season rolls around. Dang it. So now, because, now I can't watch the football games because they don't stream those on Netflix. So what am I doing now? So now I'm going to the bar. Well, you can't just go sit there and watch TV, right? So now you're spending money. You get it? So this thing works against you, but it also works for you. Now, think about how that impacts your relationships, right? Think about how that impacts your relationships. Here I am. I didn't sleep the night before. I got up. I'm sore. I'm tired. I went to work, whatever. I dealt with people, and they're poop all day long. And then I come home and the boys want to play because they haven't seen me all day. And what am I? I'm grouchy now. I'm grouchy. Why is Dad so grouchy? So now there's an issue there. So do you see how everything is interconnected? So on the one hand, it can work against us if we don't understand the system. But on the other hand, it can work for us because you don't have to make big changes to have big changes in your life. You can make small changes and experience, by the time it circulates through your entire system, works. Same thing if you do family therapy, which God bless any counselor on the planet alive who wants to do family therapy or marriage counseling, because anytime I tried to do it, I always felt like Moses. When the Egyptian army is bearing down on him and the Red Sea is before him, one's one spouse behind me and one's the other spouse. Because here's what I found out. People save their crap to talk about it when they're in counseling. Like all the stuff that they did, that they wanted, and before you know it, it's like World War III. But anyway, one of the ways of dealing with that is called family systems therapy. And so you examine the system of how the relationship is working. So in fact, relationship is a misnomer. Here's why. Because it's a noun. But it's not. In our language system, here's one of the ways you get messed up. In our language system, relationship is a noun. We have a relationship. But it's not a real person, place, or thing. You never put a relationship in a wheelbarrow and took it home with you and looked at it. Same thing with marriage. Same thing with communication. So the person comes in and they say, well, our marriage just stinks, it's rotten, and our relationship just sucks, and we have horrible communication. Okay, that's all like solidified processes. Like a relationship is something that you can just take out and examine and look at and, okay, well, let's and do surgery on or something. It's impossible. All relationships is a term that we use to describe the process of relating. So it's not accurate to say we have a lousy relationship. It's accurate to say we have a system or a way of relating to each other that is not working for us. And then you got to look at what's the way of relating that's not working. Make sense? But what's funny is that system works. So the alcoholic and the codependent, the system works. The abuser and the abused, believe it or not, the system works. And what's funny is people come in and say, well, if they just change their part of the system. If they just change their part of the system, then everything will be fine. Oh, no. If she just changed her part of the system, everything will be fine. Maybe I don't do very well at marriage counseling because the very first time I tried, many years ago, almost 2 decades ago, this couple comes over to my house, and they're like, okay, what's going on? And all I had back then was, if you just do what the Bible says, everything will work out. If you just submit and you just love her, it would be great. So I'm like, okay. So 30 minutes of everything he was doing wrong and everything she was doing wrong and how much they hated each other, and I'm just like sitting there and overwhelmed. Finally, I just said, well, why don't you guys just get divorced? I mean, you hate her, he hates you. I mean, what are you even doing here? And this was at my house, because we didn't have a building back then. This is when we were setting up, tearing down, all that stuff, those days. And I remember the guy stood up in my house, stood up, husband, put his hand out and said, "Thank you, Pastor, that's what I wanted to hear," and left. And there's the wife, like you could literally, it didn't even require spiritual vision. You could literally see the smoke coming out of her ears and her nostrils flaring. I was like, oh, that went well. And now she's like in my living room. So like, where do you go? Like, how do you get out of this? But anyway, that has nothing to do with what I'm saying. Except that it's a system of relating, right? So what happens is instead of waiting for the other person to change the way they're relating, if you start to examine how you're relating and you begin to change even just small things about how you're relating to the people in your life, they can't not respond because everything is interrelated. So it's like those mobiles, those mobiles that they have for kids? They have two, and they kind of interact and turn and spin and whatever. If you take one part of it and you spin it a different direction, it affects the whole thing. Which is also why some people outgrow each other. Because one person starts growing and changing and the other person can't deal with it, and because they want to maintain the system that they've set up. And so sometimes the only answer is for the person who's growing, if they want to keep growing, to get out of the system. Okay, not how I intended this to go today, but here's the thing. Now, I want you to think about yourself as a system. So one of the things in magic or some of these other spiritual systems that we don't want to touch because, they're just inherently unclean, they talk about the 4 elements: earth, air, fire, water, right? Those 4 elements are actually, let's just take alchemy as a system, because that's where the idea of the 4 elements and the 5th element originates, comes from alchemy, all right? When an alchemist is talking about earth, they're not talking about dirt. When they talk about water, they're not talking about rivers. When they talk about air, they're not talking about oxygen. And when they talk about fire, they're not talking about cooking your food or burning your house down. They're talking about aspects of who you are as a human being. So fire, let's start with fire. Fire represents passion, life power, put it that way. You think about 2 lovers in the throes of passion, right? And there's conception that takes place. There's life that takes place. So it's kind of the beginning of everything. It's what drives the engine. Without some kind of passion, without some kind of desire, you don't do anything. You don't even get up in the morning. Water represents the emotions, because they just kind of, watch your kids cycle through emotions, right? It's all over the place, right? And it's just flowing and moving and that kind of stuff. Air represents the intellect. So from an alchemical perspective, being called an airhead means you're very intelligent and you have lots of ideas. Yeah, especially for somebody like me. And then earth represents all that is other than that in your life. So it represents your physical body and your health. It represents your finances, your resources, your life context, and your relationships. Got it? So fire is passion. Water is emotions. Air is thought, intellect, and ideas. And earth represents your health. Now, here's the idea. You make a change at any one of those levels, and it's going to affect everything else. So you've ever seen the pentagram? Oh, that's an evil sign, right? Like the devil created that sign, right? Like if you draw a star, like this is what's so crazy. Like when I became got into hyper weird deliverance Christianity, it's like, you can't have you know what a pentagram is, right? It's like the 5-pointed star. Oh my God, that's of the devil. I thought, really? That was of my kindergarten teacher. Because my introduction to that symbol was, you got a star on your paper for doing really well, right? What's interesting is the way that is represented is everything but the central point at the top represents one of the four elements, right? And the reason you have the point at the top is because it represents spirit or God coming in and bringing order and intersection. Now watch how the symbol works, because they all intersect. It's to show the relationships, that they're not separate, but that they're interrelated and interconnected. And you have the point at the top to represent spirit or God ruling and ordering those things, which is why it's a magical symbol. If you invert it, you get what looks like a goat's head, right? Which is then matter ruling over spirit, which is why it's used. It's also descending rather than ascending. So a right side up pentagram shows a process of ascension, an upside down shows a process of descension, and matter ruling over spirit. Or the fifth element being buried, because anyway. You get it? So my point is, if you think about that in terms of yourself, everything then is intersecting and interacting, right? So our problem is, for most of us, we're totally scattered. We have ideas that run one way. We have passions that run a different way, and desires, wants, disappointments, all that. But our feelings are doing something else. And as a result, as within, so without, chaos erupts in our life, right? Does that make sense? Or we get chaotic outside. How many of you doing good? Oh man, I'm peaceful, I'm in harmony, my mind's not overactive, but then something major changes in the earth element. A relationship gets messed up, somebody dies, a job change, any number of things, right? And now all of a sudden, what happens? Now the air is going at night. I'm sleeping and I can't shut down my mind. Or my emotions are just all over the place. So you see how all this stuff is interactive, right? And so most people never give intention or thought on how to manage these things. And it's one of the problems that I started having with this, my past life, this one. Just to clarify for people. Yeah. Was there? We didn't have good system. We had no system. We had no path to offer people to help them bring balance and manage all this chaotic going in several different directions. And then one of the things I discovered too was that the Spirit is really good. The Spirit of God is really good at stirring the pot. like if you want to be comfortable, stay away from spirituality. Just do your life, do your thing, have your family and your job, and just keep it simple, and just do your thing. Because you start engaging this stuff, and there's going to be problems because everything is interacted. But here's the good news. The good news is, if I can look at myself through those elements, what is the air like in my life? Thoughts, my intellect, my mind. What's it doing? What are my emotions doing? The water. Where are my passions? The fire, right? How's my body? How's my health? How's my relationships? I can start looking at all those things and then realize the key to all of it is to try to bring balance to it. Am I a person who spends too much time in my head? Then I've got too much air and I don't have enough earth and water. And I'm out of balance. Am I somebody sometimes I don't even operate from a core self. I catch myself saying and doing and being a different person in various different contexts because it's all based on how I feel. And so I'm all water. Am I somebody who's too earth-minded? Am I too earthly-minded? Is everything about my life about what's out here? About just the practicalities of life and saving money and raising kids and having friends but I don't give any time to developing my inner person, these other areas of my life. So you begin to see where you are out of balance. So if I'm always in my head, and we think about as above, so below, so if I'm always in my head, what element is probably going to help balance me the most? Is it going to be fire? Probably not. That's probably not where I need to change. Because just think about how the elements interrelate. So again, as within, so without. So the idea in this system or concept is that you can look at stuff out here and how they relate, and then it corresponds to stuff in here. And if you can figure it out here, you can figure it out in here. And if you can figure it out in here, you can figure it out there, which is why it's alchemy. It's where we get chemistry. It's where we get our medicine. The problem is the inner work got lost. Does that make sense? So probably if you're really airy, you need to get what do we call it? You need to get grounded. You need to get some earth in there. You might need to get some water in there if you're one of these people that's Mr. Spock. Like you're just all ideas and head and in your head, but you have no emotion or feel. You have a hard time feeling. That's a good place to go to work. So watch. I'm a person that let me back up and say this. All right, so then there's this. Hey, yeah, this is a good group to share this with. So the planets in our solar system, our sun and our moon, give off massive amounts of energy that passes through our planet. Literally like waves. So we know the sun, obviously. There would be no life without sun. And gravity. There would be no gravity. There would be no, right? It's interesting, I was reading a thing in just a couple days ago that if the Earth is spinning at like, depending on where you are at the Earth, but at the equator, the Earth is spinning like over 1,000 miles per hour. Think about that. You're literally spinning over 1,000 miles per hour every second of your life. That's why it's crazy that we want security. I mean, you're on this spinning ball that's moving around and nobody's driving it, and you want certainty and security. Right? Anyway, how did I get off on that? Now all I'm thinking about is that. I'm getting anxious. My cup overfloweth, but it's not good. I really did lose my train of thought with that. So everything's interrelated. So we'll pick up here. Everything's interrelated. So by simply realizing, okay, now I remember what I was going to say. The planets, sorry. The planets are bombarding us with all this energy, right? And as the planets are moving, they're passing through the stars or the constellations, right? And the sun is passing through constellations, and the moon is passing through constellations. And all of that's affecting the atmosphere, and all of that is affecting you the day you got born. You could look at it this way. When you came into the earth and you took your first breath of life, what energy did you breathe in? Well, you breathed in air, but you breathe in air that's got all this stuff. So you have an imprint of life, which then becomes your astrological sign. But it's not really, it doesn't really have anything to do with the constellation. It has to do with where the sun is in the constellation when you're born. So it's not the energy from, so say I'm Virgo, it's not the energy of Virgo, it's the energy of the sun that is in Virgo. My moon sign is Sagittarius. It's not the energy of the constellation Sagittarius, it's the energy of the moon, which was in Sagittarius on the day I was born. So all that stuff actually corresponds to elements. So I'm a Virgo, which means I'm an earth sign, which means then I have a natural propensity to get too involved in earthly matters and forget about some of this other stuff. All right. Went over about like I thought it would. So, but the other thing that's interesting about my chart, so it brings back to myself, almost every other planet is in a air sign, which means that even though my sun sign, my personality sign is Virgo, I'm being impacted by all these other air signs that are around me, which has to do with thought, So I'm a person that I find it very easy to get lost in my mind and lost in ideas. It's very easy. It's a strength, but it has a shadow side. It's also a weakness. It comes very easy to me. I can read something, I can remember things I read 20 years ago. I can tell you the book, I can tell you the page. So I don't have to sit there and like go over and over and over and over and over and over like some people to remember something, right? So it's a gift. But the shadow side of that is when it's out of balance, I'm just like, you heard the term so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good? So, the other thing that tends to happen is I can get so much in that I'm cut off from not just the earthly side, but I'm cut off from the emotional side. I'm cut off from the side that has the fuel, the fire, the desire to, right? So I can look at any one of those and I can say, where can I balance myself? Where can I balance myself? And by going to work on that simple task, like not thinking about how am I going to change my life for the better, like not thinking I want to manifest a vacation next year, so I'm going to think real hard and concentrate and imagine this great vacation and it's going to come to me because the universe has got my back. Or God or whatever. Or I'm going to believe for this, or I'm going to change. And those are little things. Or I'm going to change this really big thing in my life. I'm going to attract my whatever. For some of you. Like some of you maybe, whatever. I don't know. People watching, whatever. They want to attract their soulmate or whatever, right? I'm going to do that. You get what I'm saying? Instead of thinking about it that way, look at yourself in light of those four elements and say, which one do I need or want to connect with the most in my life? And then start thinking about how can I do that? So if you're really in your head a lot, connecting with earth can be as simple as just spending more time out in nature. It can be as simple as taking exercises, mindfulness exercises, and saying, I'm going to take 15 minutes, I'm going to be outside, and I'm going to let my senses, I'm going to redirect from what I'm thinking about, my attention, my consciousness, from what I'm thinking and feeling, and I'm just going to focus on the sounds of the birds, and the feel. You've seen this thing where people talk about earthing now, where they take their shoes off and walk on the ground. Maybe you haven't seen that, so I don't know. But anyway, it's a thing. So then I'm gonna let that happen. I'm gonna give attention to my health in some small way. I'm gonna quit drinking so much caffeine, and I'm going to start eating more fruits and vegetables. I'm going to spend a little bit more time with the people that I love. See, just thinking about that is bringing that earth energy to kind of begin to balance me, right? And just doing that is going to affect the whole ecology and the whole system. And just that is going to begin to change your life for the better. Because ultimately, what we're after is balance. Really. Really, to be able to have equal amounts of that. Because when you have equal amounts and things are balanced and things are harmonious, then not only is that the secret to wholeness and peace and harmony and happiness, but it's also the place that you come from of true power. Or you can work with the element. So let's do it this way. I'm always in my mind, but my mind's always running worst case scenarios. I'm going through my Rolodex of doom. Or what'd you call it, Jackie, now with the kids? Google doom. Yeah, it's so funny. I use that with a 20-year-old. They're like, a what? I'm like, a Rolodex. Huh? That thing with cards. Okay, so you're running your Google search of doom and scrolling through all the worst case scenarios that could possibly go wrong in your life, right? So you start thinking about, how can I change the direction of the wind? so that it's more positive. So one of the things, if you have a Rolodex of doom, one of the things your mind is constantly doing is going to the future. Watch this. Some people, not everybody does that. Some people, some people are anxious because they're constantly thinking about the future. Some people are anxious because they're constantly thinking about the mistakes they made in the past and how they wish they could go back and fix it. So if your mind is going to areas of doom, realize the wind is blowing towards the future, so go with the wind, just change the future. Just spend some time consciously thinking about and imagining what could go right rather than what could go wrong. And if you just do that, guess what? You introduced a whole change into the system. Because remember, if something as simple as I'm going to get up in the morning and work out massively alters the ecology of my life, when you start working with these different elements of yourself, what happens then? Which brings me to my last point, which is if there's something you really want to manifest in your life, an answer that you want your body healed, you want a new relationship, you want more abundance coming in your life, you want that vacation to Cancun next year. Most people, when they try to do faith, or they try to do what some people call the law of attraction, or I'm going to change, they'll work with whatever element they're stuck in. And that's their problem. So for some people, it's easier to think positive thoughts because they're already in their thoughts. For other people, it's really hard for them to think positive thoughts because they're so stuck in the mud, or they're so stuck in their emotions. They're drowning in their feelings. How am I supposed to think positive when I'm just drowning in my feelings? Got it? So it would serve you well to figure out how to shift what you're feeling. And that is possible. You get it? For other people, some people, a dream board works excellent for them. You know what a dream board is? What element are you working with there? Okay, this is the test. You know what a dream board is? Like, I'm going to go to Cancun, so I'm going to pictures of Cancun up there on the board. I'm going to make this amount of money, so I'm going to put a check up here that shows this amount of money coming in. And that's your dream board. My new house, my car I want to drive, and you plaster it up. There's my dream board. What element are you working with? Okay, let me review. Air is thought and ideas. Water is emotions, right? Fire is passion, desire. And earth is everything external to yourself. Your body, your job. So if you're focusing on something out here, it's an earth element. So for some people, it's easier to just think positive. For other people, I want to do the dream board. The dream board really works for me. You're showing yourself kind of your elemental orientation. Does it make sense? If we can bring all four together, if you can have the thought of healing, and you can bring in the feeling, the emotion of feeling, you got it? And you can bring in the desire and how good it's going to feel and be to be healed. And then you can bring in some things and take action out here. Guess what you're doing? You're harmonizing everything. You're bringing to bear everything to that one central outcome. And if you can focus on that and you can bring it all together, that outcome will manifest in your life. It has to, because the law of correspondence is as above, so below, as within, so without. So it really We would be so much better served rather than just calling out to God, oh God, please, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not making fun of prayer. I'm just saying if that's all you're doing. Prayer's a good thing to do. There are some things you can't manage, can't handle. You can't change somebody else's structures. That's their job. But you can pray for them. But you can't change their structures. You're not supposed to even. That's their job. That's their work to do in this life. And some choose to do it and some don't. So you can pray and God can intervene. And so prayer has its place. But if you want to create something for yourself, sitting there crying out to God ain't going to do it. Which is why some of you will pray for other people and they'll get instant answers to prayer, but you don't seem to get any answers to your prayer because you're applying the wrong tool to the situation. So if you can think of somehow creating a workshop whereby you create your own answers to prayer by working with earth, air, water, and fire, you can begin to manifest it. So again, to take your own personal healing, right? The thought of being healthy. Reading testimonies of other people who have spontaneously been healed of whatever. Putting those ideas. Doing positive affirmations. I am healed. I am healthy. I am well. I am whole. Air. Got it? Water. What's it going to feel like? How am I going to feel? And somehow trying to access that feeling. How did I feel before I got sick? You got it? How did I feel before whatever? And trying to bring that into it. And then what would change out here? Doing things in the earthly arena. Eating right, taking your medicine, going to the doctor can be all of that. Trying to do some things you couldn't do before. Trying to act healed when you're not. You know, as long as you don't go crazy with it and throw your glasses away and start driving around. I believe I could see. Making sense to you? And then constructing that reality, putting it all together in an image. Imagination is the key. Because if I can imagine it, I actually have the thought. If I can imagine it, I have a better chance of accessing the feeling of already having it. If I can imagine it, I'm bringing in the earth element because I'm imagining what my life would be like when I actually have it. And then if I'm doing that, I've already got the desire. So really, all right, nothing to do with Father's Day, but does that help you a little bit? Give you some place to work, maybe on something practical? Again, don't get overwhelmed by all the information. Just think, where am I out of balance? How can I add some balance to my life in the context of all this? And that will have a positive effect that will reverberate throughout the entire ecology of my life. God bless you. Have a great Father's Day.